In 1979, a man who believed himself indestructible looked straight into the eyes of his own destruction and realized he had made the greatest mistake of his life. Idi Amin Dada, the tyrant who turned Uganda into hell on earth, was about to discover that even the most powerful demons can be brought down by their own arrogance. If you want to learn how one of Africa's most ruthless dictators lost absolutely everything in a matter of days, stay until the end of this video. And since we're talking about stories that forever changed the destiny of the African continent, give this video a like if you too are fascinated by these historical accounts that few dare to tell. Kampala, Uganda, 1971. The streets that once echoed with children's laughter now trembled under the thunder of military boots. In just a few months, an entire nation had become the personal playground of a man whose thirst for power was matched only by his thirst for blood. Idi Amin Dada wasn't just another dictator. He was a predator who turned an entire country into his personal hunting ground. But to understand the fatal mistake that would lead to his downfall, we must go back to the origins of this macabre story. Amin wasn't born a demon. He was forged through a volatile mix of colonial brutality, unchecked ambition, and a psychopathy that would manifest in unimaginable ways. Born into a Muslim family in northern Uganda, Amin grew up in an environment where violence was the universal language. When he enlisted in the British colonial army in 1946, officers quickly realized they had found someone exceptional, not for his intelligence or leadership, but for his terrifying ability to follow orders without question, no matter how brutal they were. He was the perfect soldier for the empire's dirtiest missions. During the Mau Mau rebellion in Kenya, Amin earned a reputation that even seasoned veterans found disturbing. He didn't just kill rebels, he tortured them, mutilated them, turning every execution into a spectacle of horror. The British were delighted. They had found their ideal attack dog. But guard dogs, when they grow too strong, tend to turn on their masters. In 1962, Uganda gained independence and Milton Obote took power. Amin, now a respected colonel, seemed like the perfect, loyal soldier. Obote couldn't have been more wrong. While the president focused on politics and diplomacy, Amin was weaving a network of absolute loyalty within the army. Every promotion, every favor, every order was calculated toward one single goal: total power. Amin's patience lasted 9 long years. In January 1971, while Obote was attending a conference in Singapore, Amin carried out one of the fastest and most effective military coups in African history. In less than 24 hours, Uganda had a new leader. What no one realized was that they had also found their executioner. The first months of Amin's rule seemed almost normal. He promised elections, talked about development, even smiled for international cameras. But behind that facade, something sinister was taking shape. Amin was testing limits, seeing how far he could go before anyone stopped him. The answer was very, very far. The first sign of what was to come appeared in July 1971. Amin ordered the execution of all soldiers in the army belonging to the Acholi and Lango ethnic groups, the same groups as his predecessor, Obote. It wasn't just a few soldiers, it was thousands. Men who had loyally served their country were taken to barracks, massacred, and their bodies dumped into mass graves. But that was just the appetizer. In August 1972, Amin made the announcement that shocked the world. All Asians, between 55,000 and 80,000 people, had 90 days to leave Uganda. It didn't matter if they were Ugandan citizens, if their families had lived there for generations, or if they owned businesses that sustained the local economy. Amin had decided they were the problem, and his solution was simple: total expulsion. The world watched in horror as entire families were forced to leave everything behind: homes, businesses, a lifetime of memories. Many were beaten, raped, or killed during the process. Amin not only stole their properties but distributed them among his followers as rewards for their loyalty. The international community protested, imposed sanctions, condemned Amin. He laughed. He had discovered something powerful. The more the world hated him, the stronger he felt. Every international condemnation became fuel for his growing megalomania. And it was at that moment that Idi Amin crossed the line between dictator and beast. Executions became more frequent, more elaborate, more public. Amin was no longer satisfied with simply killing. He wanted all of Uganda to know that he could do whatever he wanted, to anyone, at any time. Ministers were executed during cabinet meetings. Soldiers were forced to kill each other for entertainment. Women were raped in front of their husbands before both were murdered. The most chilling part was that Amin seemed to genuinely enjoy it. He laughed during executions, made jokes about corpses, and there were reports, never fully confirmed but persistent, of acts that defied all sense of humanity. Uganda had become the personal kingdom of a psychopath with absolute power. The numbers are hard to comprehend. An estimated 300,000 civilians were killed during Amin's rule. In a country of fewer than 10 million inhabitants, that meant 1 in every 30 people was executed under direct presidential orders. But Amin developed something even more sinister than violence, a cult of personality that defied all logic. He proclaimed himself His Excellency, President for Life, Field Marshal Alhaji, Dr. Idi Amin Dada, conqueror of the British Empire, victorious in Africa in general and Uganda in particular. His claims about himself grew ever more grandiose. He said he had divine visions. He even declared himself the last king of Uganda. Amin's paranoia grew alongside his megalomania. He saw enemies everywhere, in his ministers, his generals, even his wives. One of his wives, K. Amin, was found dead and dismembered after trying to leave him. Officially, it was a car accident. Unofficially, well, Amin had a pattern when it came to people who defied him. But there was something Amin didn't realize as he built his empire of terror. He was creating enemies far more dangerous than he could imagine, not just within Uganda, but in neighboring countries watching in growing horror, especially Tanzania. Julius Nyerere, the president of Tanzania, had watched silently as Amin turned Uganda into a slaughterhouse. Nyerere was everything Amin wasn't: intellectual, diplomatic, respected internationally. He had given refuge to thousands of Ugandans fleeing Amin's terror. But Nyerere had limits, and Amin was about to cross them spectacularly. By 1978, Uganda's economy was in total collapse. The expulsion of Asians had destroyed the commercial sector. The constant executions had wiped out anyone with technical expertise. Agriculture was abandoned because farmers were too afraid to leave their homes. Uganda, once called the Pearl of Africa, had become a failed state. But instead of solving his internal problems, Amin did what desperate dictators always do. He looked for an external enemy to blame and chose the worst possible one. On October 10, 1978, Amin made the mistake that would seal his fate. He invaded Tanzania. The official justification was absurd, claims that Tanzania was supporting Ugandan rebels. The truth was that Amin needed a military victory to restore his image as a strongman. He genuinely believed his army of thugs and poorly trained soldiers could easily defeat the Tanzanian forces. There has rarely been a more catastrophic miscalculation in African military history. The initial invasion was a disaster. Ugandan troops, used to terrorizing unarmed civilians, quickly discovered that fighting real soldiers was a completely different matter. They advanced a few kilometers into Tanzanian territory, looted some villages, and then stopped. They had no idea what to do next. Nyerere, who had spent years trying to solve the situation diplomatically, finally decided it was time to end Amin once and for all. But he was clever. Rather than merely repel the invasion, he turned the war into a liberation crusade. Nyerere assembled not only the Tanzanian army, but also thousands of Ugandan exiles who had been waiting for this chance for years. Former Obote soldiers, survivors of Amin's massacres, entire families who had lost everything. They all joined what became known as the Ugandan National Liberation Army. In November 1978, the Tanzanian counteroffensive began, and it was devastating. Amin's troops, so fearsome when slaughtering civilians, completely disintegrated when faced with a real army. Soldiers deserted en masse. Officers abandoned their units. Within weeks, what Amin thought would be a quick war turned into a humiliating rout. As the Tanzanian forces advanced into Uganda, something extraordinary happened. The Ugandan population didn't just welcome the invaders as liberators, they joined them. Entire villages rose up against Amin's garrisons. Ugandan soldiers began surrendering en masse or simply switching sides. Amin, who had spent 8 years believing himself invincible, suddenly found himself commanding a ghost army in a country that hated him. In December 1978, Tanzanian forces crossed the Ugandan border. Amin ordered resistance to the death. His commanders laughed in his face and fled. He promised fabulous rewards to anyone who fought, but no one was left to listen. The capital, Kampala, once trembling with fear at the mere mention of his name, now saw Amin's posters being burned in the streets. Statues erected in his honor were torn down. The presidential palace, where so many horrors had been committed, was abandoned even by its guards. On April 11, 1979, less than 6 months after launching his victorious war, Idi Amin fled Uganda like a dog with its tail between its legs. He narrowly escaped capture, taking only a few suitcases and a handful of loyal followers. The man who proclaimed himself immortal, who claimed divine support, who promised to rule Uganda forever, was defeated in mere months by one catastrophic miscalculation. But the true irony of Amin's story didn't end with his escape. He managed to secure asylum in Libya, then moved to Saudi Arabia, where he lived comfortably until his death on August 16, 2003. Meanwhile, Uganda took decades to recover from the trauma he had inflicted. Mass graves were unearthed, revealing horrors that shocked even the most experienced investigators, children's bones mixed with those of adults, evidence of torture beyond description, entire families exterminated for crimes that existed only in the sick mind of a dictator. Uganda lost an entire generation of intellectuals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders, people who could have built a prosperous nation, murdered out of paranoia and sadism. The economic damage lasted for decades, and the psychological scars persist to this day. And the mistake that caused it all? Pure, simple arrogance. Amin believed his own propaganda. He truly thought he was invincible, that he could do anything without consequence, that the terror he inspired within Uganda would automatically translate into real military power. He confused domestic terror with international strength. More importantly, he completely underestimated the determination of a leader like Julius Nyerere, who had decided that some evils are simply too great to be tolerated. The story of Idi Amin is a grim reminder of how absolute power can transform a human being into something monstrous. But it is also a lesson in how even the most brutal tyrants can be defeated when they face organized and determined resistance. Uganda today is a completely different country. It still faces challenges like any developing nation, but it has never again lived under the yoke of a dictator like Amin. The memory of those 8 years of horror serves as a constant reminder that democracy and human rights are not luxuries, they are absolute necessities. And Idi Amin died of kidney failure in a Saudi hospital, surrounded not by terrified subjects or loyal followers, but by paid nurses and doctors who treated him like any other elderly patient. The man who once terrorized an entire nation ended his days as a forgotten relic of a past the world prefers to forget. If you've made it this far, it's because you understand the importance of knowing these stories that shaped Africa and the world. Give this video a like if this story moved you. Subscribe to the channel because we have many more fascinating and disturbing stories from African history to tell. And tell us in the comments, which aspect of Idi Amin's story struck you the most, his brutality, his arrogance, or how quickly he was defeated. Africa's history is full of complex characters, heroes and villains, tragedies and triumphs that the world needs to know. And we'll be here every week bringing you these narratives that are far more fascinating than any fiction.